All right, shalom, shalom, shalom. All praises to the Most High, Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, which is to say in the Paleo Hebrew, Yahweh, which is the name of our Heavenly Father, meaning He is, Bahashem, meaning in the name, Yahweh Shai, meaning He is our salvation, and that is who the world ignorantly calls Jesus a so-called black man, who, by the way, only came for the Israelites, you so-called blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans, all right? And speaking on the Israelites, this king, or what they will call president, that goes by the name of Trump, has now added a tax, albeit small, but still a tax nevertheless, on any immigrant sending money back to their prospective country. All right, from America. So any immigrant here in America who sends money back to their home, they will be taxed. Okay, if they send $1,000, they'll be taxed $100. If they send $10,000, they'll be taxed $1,000. All right, so it's a 1% tax, nevertheless, but it's just the idea of them taxing your money. Okay. You may, want to send money back home to Nana or Papa for something or whatever, and guess what? If you don't have the proper paperwork, you will be taxed, okay? All money, or what they say is remittance, which is a gift or money or any sort of, such a thing, will be taxed. Now, this is the Trump remittance tax, all right? This is from Payments Dive, and the headline or the subtitle reads, Trump imposes new remittance tax. The spending and tax bill signed by President Donald Trump includes a new levy on international money transfers, though it's lower than initially proposed. So on top of you already paying taxes, shipping fees, and everything else to send money back home or what have you, you will be hit with this new imposed remittance tax. Okay? So for all you, immigrants here in America, you're going to be paying to send money back home. All right? On top of the fees and everything else that you're already paying. It says, after President Donald Trump signed his milestone tax and spending bill over the 4th of July weekend, remittance payment services providers were relieved. While an earlier version of the bill included a 5% tax on the cross-border money transfers frequently used by migrants to send money to friends and family in other countries, the one Trump signed reduced the tax to 1%. The new remittance tax is effective next year. So this goes into effect of 2026, which is only a few months away. It says payment companies and Finches fought fiercely against the tax, arguing it would be a significant cost burden. In a May letter to congregational leaders, the American FinTech Council, which represents some payments companies, expressed strong concern about the tax and said it would harm small businesses and everyday consumers while empowering bad actors and undermining effective anti-money laundering enforcements. The council locked arms with other industry organizations, including the Financial Technology Association and Electronic Transactions Associations, to oppose the initial proposal. The trade groups also objected to Americans being required to disclose personal information to avoid having to pay the tax. So if you disclose personal information, you won't have to be taxed. But if not, you're going to be taxed. Okay? So, I guess they're saying it's their way of trying to cut down on, undocumented immigrants getting paid under the table here in America and then sending it back home to their families and friends without getting their share of the cut. All right, because that's what it all comes down to, these taxes, man. All right, the government just want to get their share. All right, so here it is. You got a contractor or an employer that has, I don't want to use the word hire, but has got some help from undocumented immigrants, and they're paying them under the table peanuts, and on top of being paid peanuts now to work for what they should be getting paid a fair share, but because they're quote unquote illegal here, these employers can, pretty much take advantage of them by giving them peanuts on the dollar, and the little money that they do get, they want to send back home to what? Feed the family or the friends or whatever. They got to get a tax on top of that. Already peanuts that they're getting paid here to what? Send the money or whatever it is back overseas or wherever they come from to get, money to their family. So they're going to get hit with a tax unless they can provide documented information. It says new fintech entrants such as Seattle. Well, let's go down to something else. Some payments industry groups still, nope. Here, the U.S. is the country from which the majority of remittance flow. Let's go into that word remittance.
Remittance.
It's a sum of money sent, especially by mail, and payment for goods or services or as a gift. All right. Now, they may even put a percent on gifts, they may even put a percent on gifts, all right? Because you can easily repackage those gifts in another country and resell it, all right? You want to buy shoes here and, or whatever, shirts or, whatever, send them back home. You may be hit with a 1% sales tax, all right? So that's what remittance is, a sum of money sent, especially by mail, in payment for goods or services or as a gift. All right. So we see that U.S. is the country from which the majority of remittance flow, right? Because this is Babylon the Great. That's why when this place goes up in smoke, as it says in Revelation 18, the other countries are going to be well, man. Okay, because they're not going to make any money like they did once before. All right. So it's all coming to pass, man. It's all coming to forefront that Babylon the Great is on its way out the door. It says the U.S. is the country from which the majority of remittances flow, with the top recipient countries being India, Mexico, and China, respectively, according to a World Bank blog post in December. That international organization estimated the expanding remittance market last year at $685 billion in payment flows. All right. If you do a 1% tax on that, you're gonna come up pretty big, man. All right. So, we know a lot of these immigrants that's undocumented, they work under the table, they send money back home as gifts, as whatever, and so they don't have to pay that tax. But now, beginning next year in 2026, they're going to pay that tax. All right. So let's get a couple of precepts and then we'll close out. This is Habakkuk 2:6. It reads, "Shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, Woe to him that increaseth that which is not his? How long?" See? So whatever you work, man, you're supposed to get paid the same day. So by them holding off and waiting till you get paid at the end of the week or bi-weekly or the end of the month, they can tax you more. All right. The same thing. Here it is. You going to send money to a recipient on the other side, which, if it's in another country and you don't have the proper paperwork here in America and you send it, you're going to get taxed. All right. On top of all the other payments and taxes that you pay for sending that money. So it says, shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunt and proverb against him, and say, woe to him, or destruction to him that increaseth that which is not his. How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay, or debt. See? So he comes and put this debt or these taxes on you, and, take away whatever it is that you thought you was going to keep to yourself. He takes a piece of that and, makes it his. All right. So whether it's your work that you supposed to get paid daily, whether it's him holding out and giving you a check at the end of the week or the next week or the end of the month or once a month, to now, if you work and you don't have the proper paperwork and you send money overseas, you're going to get taxed, albeit 1%. Nevertheless, it's still a tax, okay? It's still a tax. It's intruding on your, I don't want to go to that point where it's intruding on your freedom, but it's intruding on your livelihood, okay? Especially, if you ain't supposed to be here working under the table, it's gonna catch up with you. See? So this is a tax to discourage those that are getting paid under the table. All right? But not understanding those people that's getting paid under the table is what's keeping this economy as it is right now flowing. All right? Because nobody wants to do those trivial jobs. All right? Picking oranges, doing shingles and all that type of stuff, man. All right, see? And he knows because they already discussed this earlier, and that's why they had to put a pause, because the farmers couldn't find people to fill the jobs that, they were deporting these migrants by the boatloads in the beginning. He had to slow down, but now, I guess he's back on it. All right. The cruel Lord is back on it, man. All right. It went from 5% to 1%, but nevertheless, hey, if you got a family of 15 quote unquote illegal migrants working and they getting paid under the table, and let's say each one of them is making 300 to 500 a week, that's 13, or let's just say 10 times 500 is 5,000. Okay. Let's say they send half of that back home, which is 2,500. All right. And if I'm not mistaken, if 1% is either $25 or $250 on top of the taxes or whatever else they got to pay for money orders or money grams or whatever, guess what? That's a form of thick clay, man. Okay. Albeit it's 1%, but nevertheless, man, it's showing you that, they can take something from you that they didn't have originally given to you, okay? Through what? This big, beautiful bill, all right? That's why the people are going to be what? Lamenting. Revelation 18. It goes into it. Because it said the U.S. is the world's biggest remittance that sends, gifts and things like that to other parts of the world. It says, and the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her. This is speaking of Babylon, America, USA, and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come, and the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her. See? Why? For no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. Okay? Once this place is destroyed by the way of thermonuclear fire in the chariots, it's going to be a lot of merchants, people that buying and selling that's going to lament, man. Okay? Because they all are in bed with this whore, man. All right? They all making money, all right? At the expense of their own people. Okay? It says, and the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all fine wood and all manner vessels of ivory and all manner vessels of most precious wood and of brass and of iron and marble. So this is a list of things that, bring in money, okay? That other countries sell to America, and in return, America buys from them, you see, which has propped up the dollar to be the world reserve currency for this amount of time, since the late, 40s or 50s or whenever it took a president to the world reserve currency from, I believe at that time was the British pound. All right. Ever since then, man, okay, the merchants of the earth have been, have been living deliciously, okay? But before that, prior to that as well, okay? Because what? Through slavery, all right? Cheap labor, all right? That's what America was built on. Cheap labor, or should I say free labor, all right? Because they didn't pay the slaves, the so-called blacks to work here. They brought them over here doing slavery, and they worked for pretty much free. Peanuts. All right, just like today, man. How you got the quote-unquote illegal or undocumented immigrants that's working for free or, peanuts. And then they want to send money back home because if you know anything, for the most part, the dollar as being the world reserve currency is the, preferred currency in these, I don't want to call them third world countries, but these less developed countries, all right, that a lot of the northern kingdoms come from. So when they send the money back over in dollars, guess what? The recipient, the friends or the families, they get a bump because the dollar is worth more than their currency. But now with that 1% tax, it almost levels it out, all right? So now that $25 or that $250 is pretty much cut down, okay? Because why? That 1% tax, all right? At $2,500, you get to hit it with 1% tax. Let me see if I can do that math. 2,500 times 0.01. Oh, that's $25, all right? But over a course of time, that adds up, all right? That adds up. So guess what? That takes away the fact that the dollar is the world reserve currency, that if I trade the dollar back to pesos, for example, I'm going to get more in pesos because the dollar is worth more, all right? But now with that tax, it kind of takes away that power, albeit it's a little tax. Nevertheless, it's still a tax, all right? On top of the other fees, that's what the word I'm looking for. On top of the other fees that you have to pay to send money, you got to now be taxed, okay? So on top of the fees that you pay to send money from these Western Unions and Instagrams, now you got to be taxed on top of that, all right? And the merchants, they gonna feel it, man, all right? So the end is coming, man, all right? The end of this system is almost at its end. All right, it's circling the drain. They're going to come up with the digital currency, so you get taxed, and they don't have to go through all of this. Okay, this is a headache for them to write a bill to tax you for 1% when they can just get you chipped. It's way more easier. All right, it's way more easier. So they getting tired of these bills and writing all this. They just gonna say, man, we just want to chip you and get it over with. All right. So it's coming to an end, man. This little remittance tax is insignificant in the I don't want to say overall scheme, but it's still significant in the fact that it's getting you prepared for a totalitarian system. All right. Where even if you make a little bit, if you don't comply to the rules and regulations, they're going to take that little bit from you. All right. So this is about where we at, man. All right. One step at a time, just like they taking away the penny. All right. You think it's just going to stop at the penny? No. So it's 1% now, but who's to say in a year or two, it won't be 10 or 15%. All right. So it all depends on the greed that this government wants to use to what? Further push their agenda of what? Increasing that thick clay, that debt, those taxes. All right. So we here. Okay. We here, man. All right. And it's all coming to fruition when this big, beautiful bill kicks in next year, 2026. All right. So let's finish up and close out with 1 Peter 5:8. This is the book of 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8. It reads, be sober, be vigilant. See, this is why the Lord has set up servants, the prophets, to tell you, to warn you of just who your enemy is, exactly, how bad he wants to laden you with heavy, thick clay. He doesn't want you to own anything. And if you do get something, it's just by the sheer chance of what? I don't want to say you slip through the cracks, but hey, some of our people, they do get a little quote unquote come up with a good paying job or what have you. All right. But you got to understand, man, the Most High give it to you and he can take it back from you, man. All right. There's nothing here in this society, in this place, that you should be hanging your hat on that, hey, you won't have tomorrow. All right. Why? Because it can all be taken from you just like that in the blink of an eye, man. All right. If this devil crashed this system and the computers go down and all these, the money ain't nothing but numbers, man. All right. Your bank account can be wiped out just like that, man. And they can come back up online and say, in order for you to receive your money, you have to take this digital device. We're not saying that we won't give you the money. It's just that we have a more secure system now in this way that you have to take in order to recoup the loss that you got from the crash or whatever. All right. And we very much well are on that brink of this system being, crashed, especially if they come out with that Epstein list or file or whatever. All right. So we telling you to what? Be sober, be vigilant. Why? Because your adversary, the devil, the so-called white man, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Right. So if you can't see the play being put into position, you gotta look a little harder, man. All right. Stay locked in. Okay. Pray. All right. And have faith above all, man. You got to have faith that this is going to come to pass. All right. Because if not, faith without works is dead. Okay. You got to keep locked in, man. This devil's getting ready to make a move. Something big is coming. All right. We can't tell you what it is, but we can tell you it's coming. All right. And if you ain't ready and if you ain't prepared, you're going to get caught off guard. All right. So we're going to conclude with that. And with that being said, pray someone was edified through this lesson. And until the next time, if it be the Lord's will, stay strong, stay in the faith. We almost home. Shalom. Peace.